Listen, they wonder why families in New York are leaving New York. They wonder why. This migrant issue is out of control. This whole thing is out of control. Let's look.
Talk about several of the 6 migrant squatters released without bail on gun and drug charges. They are now back behind bars. 3 were taken into custody by ICE agents in the Norwood section of the Bronx yesterday. That was a surprise. Authorities say they were part of a heavily armed group of migrants allegedly selling drugs after taking over this multi-family house. They were squatting there despite the landlord trying to get them out.
Yes, I got you.
8 were arrested last week. The DA's office was asking for bail, but 6 were set free on supervised release by a judge, while the other 2 were being held due to prior arrests. But some of those 6, they also had prior arrests. Earlier this week, I sat down with the NYPD Chief of Patrol, John Schell, to discuss this situation.
A sergeant and 2 cops pull up to this house. They see a man pointing a gun down a driveway. They chase that man into a basement apartment, and they make the arrest. That man was out on an attempted murder from Yonkers months prior, and he's an asylum seeker. He's a migrant. In that melee, if you will, there was 7 other people in the house. Guns, drugs in the house, ketamine, children in the house, and according to the landlord, they haven't paid the rents in months. Here we are the same week that we're burying one of our officers doing the same thing, paying for the same real estate twice. These people shouldn't have been out in the street.
So after this arrest, where are they now?
6 of 8 were released on their own recognizance or supervised release, which we don't know what supervised release even means, to be honest with you.
Well, now some of them have been arrested.
This is a joke. This is a joke. Our whole system is a joke. Like, I don't blame people for saying they want to get out of there and move. You see why?
By ICE. ICE came in. Now, usually NYPD cannot, because we're a sanctuary city, cannot notify ICE. But, you know, it was the front page of the New York Post yesterday. ICE didn't need any notification. Anyway, this is happening in our city right now. These guys are somewhere in federal custody.
The opening of the new migrant shelter at Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn did not go as smoothly as some officials had hoped.
Several migrant families that were bused to the facility refused to stay there. They got right back on the bus. Briella Tomasetti at Floyd Bennett Field. What's going on? How is this possible?
Yeah, it is possible, Rosanna and Dan. Clearly, the situation is not ideal here. It's a transit desert. It is far from everything. It's not close to where parents have to take their kids to school. The bathrooms, the showers are outside. A long list of concerns. I could go on and on. But 23 families with children were expected to arrive here yesterday. Not all of them obviously stayed. A spokesperson for the mayor's office telling the New York Post that while some migrants did reject the site, another busload of asylum seekers arrived at around 2:30 yesterday afternoon, and they did opt to stay. Less than an hour after the first batch of migrants arrived at Brooklyn's Floyd Bennett Field, families boarded the bus that took them there and went back to the Roosevelt Hotel Intake Center. City Council member Joanne Ariola, who represents neighborhoods in Queens, posted on the social media platform X that migrants refused to stay for various reasons, such as location, conditions, and the proximity of the schools where their children are registered. State Assembly member Jamie Williams was on site and echoed those concerns.
It's a very isolated area. When Dizzy came in, you have to come all around. So it's not a place where you put women and children, and then the facilities is just not, friendly, especially in the middle of the night if a child or an adult have to get up to go outside of the tent to use that bathroom.
Floyd Bennett Field was first proposed as a shelter site months ago. The former airfield space is owned by the federal government, but Governor Hochul is footing the $20 million bill. The makeshift shelter has enough room to house 2,000 people. But the proposal was immediately met with intense pushback due to its inconvenient location, lack of mass transit, susceptibility to flooding, and more.
But you either deal with this or you deal with what we were just looking at previously and what we've been looking at. So what are you saying here? I don't understand. Help me understand.
I've toured the site last month. There are 4 dormitories, a tent for registration and for people to connect with caseworkers. Another tent will be used as a cafeteria, but communal bathrooms and showers are set up outside.
This is not, best conditions, but we're managing the crisis, and you cannot say any better that we need help.
Meanwhile, Mayor Adams toured the site last night, doubling down on his calls for more federal assistance. The mayor's office sent out a statement saying, in part, with more than 65,600 migrants currently in our care and thousands more continuing to arrive every week, we have used every possible corner of New York City and are quite simply out of good options to shelter migrants. No municipality should be left to manage a national crisis almost entirely on its own. It's not fair to New Yorkers, and it's not fair to asylum seekers. The city has set up more than 200 emergency shelters since the crisis began, and 2 large-scale relief centers, one outside the Creedmoor Psychiatric Center in Queens and another on Randall's Island.
Big problem is the situation that New York City is in. And so, again, a site like this is needed because we don't have any others. If we had some other places, I'd love for people to let us know where they are.
The Legal Aid Society toured this site a few weeks ago and wrote a long list of concerns to the city about why it is not suitable for families with children. Representatives were back here again yesterday. They are doubling down on their calls for the city to pull out of this plan, but the question remains, with people already moving in, is that even possible at this point? For now, we're live at Floyd Bennett Fields. Dan and Rosanna, back to you.
So, Briella, before you go, I heard those people who refused to stay at Floyd Bennett now are on their own.
Well, there was actually a person who was working here and coordinating the people getting on and off the buses, Rosanna. He told our reporter who was here yesterday that they were going to the Roosevelt Hotel, which is the intake center. So it's unclear really what the deal is here, if they're going there, if they're going somewhere else, if they're getting on a bus and they're on their own at this point. The city has really not given us too many answers as to what's going on, so not so concrete.
Interesting. Okay, Briella, thank you so much.
Plus, new developments in the city's migrant crisis, the changes that could boot them from temporary shelters. Good Friday evening, I'm Natalie Pascarella. The city says that 183,000 migrants have arrived in the city over 2 years, many filtering into the city's temporary shelters. And now there's a policy shift. Many migrants currently in those shelters will be given housing for 30 days, then they're on their own. News 4 Government Affairs.
And then what? How is this? I'm lost, man. This is crazy. You get 30 days of shelter and then they pushing you out on the people. Figure it out. And then when you do that, you force them into a life of crime and different things like that. Like, what is going on? Why do the people have to deal with? I don't get it.
Affairs reporter Melissa Russo joining us from Lower Manhattan with the latest.
Natalie, New York City's right to shelter will remain intact, even for migrants. But under this deal, the city will have more power to decide how long migrants who land in our New York City shelters can stay there.
Now we have a workable path forward.
In court this afternoon, Judge Gerald Leibovitz saying the settlement will ease the burden for a city shelter system stretched to its breaking point by thousands of arriving migrants, while preserving the safety net.
So that everyone has a right to a bed in safe conditions, instead of sleeping on the streets or in waiting room chairs or dying in the cold.
The deal comes after months of intense negotiations. Critics worried the city Adams administration hoped to gut the right to shelter.
From day one, we said that we did not want people on the street.
This new agreement acknowledges the realities of where we are today, affirms our shared mission to help those in need, and grants us additional flexibility to navigate this ongoing crisis.
Under the deal, migrant adults without children.
And I get trying to help people in need, but at what point do you say this is starting to affect us? At what point do you, like, it gotta start with, in the fire service, we used to operate off a system called I, we, then they, right? I, we, they. Meaning if I'm on my way to a fire, me as a firefighter, I had to worry about me first, then I had to worry about the group I was with, then we had to worry about the people we're going to save, because what good are the people we're going to save if I mess up, or if I get injured, or if I cause the truck to wreck on the way there? You know what I'm saying? So that analogy I'm placing on them, like we're worrying about they and at the expense of I. At what point in time? Like this is, it's getting out of control. It's out of control.
Will still face a 30-day time limit on shelter, but moving forward, instead of being able to reapply indefinitely for more 30-day placements, the city will now have the authority to decide case by case who gets an extension and for how long, based on extenuating circumstances.
Have they shown that they are making genuine efforts to try to move on? And if they have done that, then that's an extenuating circumstance.
But city officials define those extenuating circumstances differently, emphasizing people who are close to moving out.
Extenuating circumstance could be a situation where you are supposed to leave, however you've signed a lease and you need 10 days to go. That can be considered an extenuating circumstance.
But, you know, without work permits, it's the case for many migrants that they need more than 30 or 40 days to reach financial independence. But you just heard the city's spin on this deal today is basically emphasizing their message to migrants, which is we want you to move along ASAP. Meanwhile, will people end up in the street in reality? The Legal Aid Society says they will be monitoring the situation, and the judge today made a point of saying this, his door will remain open in case this agreement does not work in practice. We're live at State Supreme Court in Lower Manhattan. Melissa Russo, News 4, New York.
A group of migrants found squatting inside an apartment in the Bronx were arrested on gun and drug charges, but then some were subsequently released without bail. Good Day's Briella Tomasetti, she is live in the Norwood section of the Bronx with more. Briella, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Tashani, good morning to you. Well, out of the 6 people freed without bail, 4 of them are out on supervised release. Now, not only were there guns and drugs in this home behind me, all of these illegal activities happened right across the street from a school. Surveillance video shows the moment 3 cop cars pull up to Hull Avenue and East 107th Street in the Bronx. At least 4 NYPD officers are seen running in the direction of a multifamily home and coming back into frame with several people in handcuffs. The raid resulting in 8 arrests and the confiscation of weapons and drugs. Police say suspected migrants were illegally taking up residence there.
The problem is that they were squatters.
Alfred Munoz believes the group was living next door to him for 6 months or possibly even longer.
There were a lot of people, a lot of young people, a lot of motorcycles.
The alleged squatters were busted after police got a call for a person with a gun at the home last Wednesday. Upon arrival, responding officers found a 24-year-old man armed with a pistol and chased him into the basement apartment. He was arrested along with 7 other suspected migrants, including a 22-year-old man who tried to run off with a weapon. According to a complaint filed in court, a search at the home turned up even more guns, ammunition, and cocaine.
They were a nuisance in the neighborhood.
The 8 suspects face gun, drug, and child endangerment charges. All but 2 of them were released without bail, something that has neighbors sleeping with one eye open.
Obviously, you don't want hooligans hanging out with you or living near you. Yeah, it's a very peaceful, quiet street.
Yeah, and Munoz, that neighbor you just heard from, believes that the squatters, the alleged squatters, moved in without the owner's knowledge and says the owner probably couldn't get them evicted because they were living here for more than 30 days now.
It's because the laws benefit the squatters. That's the whole problem. Or at least one of the problems. It's a main one, though. They understand the laws. And they know if I can get in here 30 days, if I can receive mail here, Oh, we got residents now. It's going to take them years to get us out of here. And that's the problem.
Now he will have to take his case up with the courts. For now, we're live here in the Norwood section of the Bronx. Tashani, back to you.
Briella, thank you.
Which G7 nation has the fastest growing population of them all? It's not the US or Germany. They're not even close. It's Canada. And while the country has made this kind of growth a priority, largely through immigration, including large numbers of temporary workers and international students, there are signs that its previously well-regarded safety net isn't living up to the hype.
You have shelter, you have food, healthcare, things like that. We have a pretty good reputation in that area, and Canadians, I think, are proud of that. But the hope is also that in building that kind of a system, it will have the sort of resilience that when unexpected shocks come around, the system is also able to adapt to that.
Good. Sometimes it feels like Canada's accessible healthcare system has become a bit of a broken promise.
It almost seems like Canada is breaking some of the implicit promises that it's made to the immigrants that it's trying to attract. The people who are coming here think Canada is going to be a certain way, and it's turned out that it's been a lot harder for a lot of them.
We have consciously made the decision that we want to have a robust immigration policy for a number of reasons, including the fact that, like many countries in the world, our birth rate is falling. We are a really big country. There are not a lot of people here. That means the social safety net is very expensive. There is no doubt that the sheer number of people that are coming into Canada right now is putting some strain on the system. There has been decades of underinvestment in housing. You have house flipping, you have people buying houses not to occupy them. All of that drives up prices. Meanwhile, the supply is slow. Then on top of that, you add a huge number of people coming in, and you just kind of get this perfect scenario in which the strain is being felt on all sides. The number of people...
This is a forecast of what's happening here. I'm telling you, this is exactly what is going on. You're seeing it.
Living in emergency shelters in Toronto is about $9,000 a night, and that is twice what it was a decade ago. If you don't have housing, if you don't have a roof over your head, it's very difficult to tackle other issues like unemployment, food security, or abuse problems, drug abuse problems.
You get a curfew, you get crappy food, but you get food, right? And you're being told what to do. Now here, you get individual living. People can live on their own. They can live amongst people who understand them.
Oh, there's tons of housing here. Buildings that are being used and stuff, and they're just sitting empty. So the city can't sit there and say that there's no housing.
Most people cannot afford to buy a house in Toronto. That means that there are a lot more people who need to rent, and it is the rental segment of the market where you really see the strains on the system appearing.
Arushi Thakkar is one of those renters. She's one of the more than 1 million international students studying, working, and volunteering in Canada. That incredibly high number of transplants means that housing is much harder to come by. Greater numbers of international students have been a quick fix for Canada's underfunded colleges and universities, as they pay around 5 times as much in fees as domestic students.
When I came to Canada, whether they are my friends, whether they are my classmates, or any of the international students, there is a terrible housing situation. My very first place where I was living was somewhere around $400 to $500. It was just a place where it was not wholly constructed, just a room. There was no kitchen, there was just a table where you can cook something, and that's it. And one of the things which mainly attracted me towards Canada was because, yeah, some were secure, because you don't have to worry about the job, and the country is little reliable as comparative to other countries. There are so much things which I believe any international student has to go through. There is no job opportunities for a lot of students. I see my friends, they're suffering even for $5.
Do you think that your friends who are also international students, do they want to stay in Canada? Or
No one wants to stay. Most of the international students I've met with, they don't want to stay in Canada.
But you also have to get to the reasoning as to why people are raising the rates so high. Look at the New York situation, right? Look at how the migrant situation in New York and the squatting situation. Now, when they get people that are squatting out of their homes and different things like that, or people who allow other people to squat. So you have renters who are renting from a landlord, and the landlord has no idea this is going on. You have renters allowing other people to live there too or squat there too, and things start happening around the neighborhood. So when the landlord finally gets them out, what does he do? Oh, I'm gonna up the price. Oh, I'm gonna make it that much harder. That way I don't have to deal with that. So then when you have a person that comes around, i.e. maybe an international student or somebody else come around and they say, oh man, it's too high. Well, that's because something caused it. It's not always about greed. Now, don't get me wrong. Some people are just greedy, but a lot of times that's not always the case. It's reasoning that caused that to be that way. It's reasoning these neighborhoods to band together and started driving. It's reasons. So you can see from both sides the problems and the issues.
Food banks like Sidom, where Arushi volunteers, have seen an increase in people unable to afford basic staples, including many of the international students who work here.
The industry is growing. We never expected that this industry would grow, and almost 27,000 people a month in all different programs. That's not stopping. You don't see an end.
And food insecurity isn't confined only to one region in Canada.
Even in Calgary, which is one of Canada's last affordable big cities, food insecurity is a problem, and rising food prices are taking a big bite out of people's budgets. I talked to the Calgary Food Bank, and they said that they served 33,000 people in December. That's up 40% from a year ago. So it's a really big problem that a lot of people are facing.
Even Canada's healthcare system has been strained by population shifts, especially in cities.
Canadians feel grateful to have access to a free healthcare system. They pay for it through taxation, of course, but if they get out of a surgery, they won't have a bill waiting for them. In terms of numbers, about 1 in 5 Canadians does not have a regular family doctor. A family doctor is a general practitioner. If you need access to a dermatologist or a cardiologist, you need to get through a family doctor. So family doctors are critical in the system as first-line responders. Here in Quebec, we don't have the highest or the lowest doctor to population ratio, but it is here where you'll find the highest shortage of family doctor. We're reaching record highs of immigration in Canada right now. The family doctors didn't follow that. Many physicians are retiring today, and young physicians are looking for better work-life balance.
My name is Dr. Mark Roper. I'm a family doctor or general practitioner here in Montreal for the last 35 years. A single-payer system is attractive for a number of ways. There is very little hassle about billing patients. We don't actually bill our patients at all. We bill directly the single payer, which is a branch of the government that's paid out of the taxes of the state. It's never really a consideration when we're seeing our patients, and our billing is very efficient and very rapid. We can't be blind to the pitfalls. I mean, there are pitfalls in the American system, there are pitfalls in the Canadian system. And we have some areas that are 94% of the population have a family doctor, but some regions of Montreal it's gone down to 55%. At 55% of the population with a family doctor in a single-payer system without another option, you have a lot of diabetics who don't even know they're diabetic, or hypertensives who don't know they're hypertensive. So this has created in the center of Montreal a healthcare crisis.
Early this year, 1 in 40 people in the entire country was on a foreign study visa. Mark Miller, Canada's immigration minister, announced in March that the nation would reduce the number of temporary residents by 20% over the next 3 years, or about 500,000 people. Whether that's enough to reverse the backslide in quality of life remains to be seen. The work of holding true to the promise of Canada's safety net is very much a work still in progress.
In a lot of ways, nation building is still kind of a thing that is going on here, which is why it's so important that we get these policies right. There is still commitment to these social programs. It is a matter of funding them in an efficient way and I guess quickly enough that we can keep up with all of these new strains on the system.